Yes.
Laicization is a bit difficult to read, but you think that's the word at the bottom?
I presume so, yes.
Then CSA means child sexual assault.
I presume so, I don't know. I presume so.
Is that a acronym you use?
No.
It's not?
Those initials, no.
But you presume that it means child sexual assault.
I'd have to ask him, I don't know. I presume so, but I don't know.
And child sexual assault was obviously a topic of discussion at that meeting.
That's what the whole point of the meeting was about, yes.
Now, can I turn to tab 194? There's been reference before, Father, about a file note from the Professional Standards Office. And earlier I suggested to you that a 1996 file note would obviously be not a contemporaneous note. That was in the context the Professional Standards Office was not in place in 1992. You understand?
No, it came with John Davern around about 1996.
Now, do you understand this to be the Professional Standards Office file note that was referred to in previous letters?
No, I don't know what that file note was.
You never saw it? I thought there was an email providing it to you. That's not right?
No, they never provided it to me. I asked twice and never got it.
So I take it you've read this in the context of the tender bundle.
Yes.
What did it seem to be to you?
Well, it's someone's summary. I don't know who wrote it. This is a standard form which
Hello.
I'm not quite sure of the date of it.
Yes, this is Father Brian Lucas. Just pausing
It
here.
says date of entry January 1996.
For
Yeah,
some reason.
sorry, yes. I don't know what this
Still
is. I
bumping.
presume it's their standard form and someone has filled in the details.
Thank you.
fine.
Now, there was another meeting planned with Father Farrell in October, but he didn't turn up.
Meeting here.
I don't know whether he didn't turn up or it was cancelled.
It didn't happen.
I don't recall that I sat there waiting for him. I presume it was cancelled.
And then there was a third and final meeting where all were present.
I understand all the present, yes.
Tab 175 is a Peters to Bishop Manning
There is a previous
after that
recording,
meeting,
by the way. This is the last,
dated the 25th.
Yes.
You've clearly seen this letter recently.
Yes.
Did you see it around about the time that it was?
which is the point.
Now, the first paragraph,
Yeah.
very similar terms to the first letter, and is undoubtedly correct,
Yes.
as with the second paragraph.
Yes.
And the first numbered paragraph,
Perpetrating in the future as well. Yeah, simple as that.
what wasn't acceptable to him was the voluntary laicization or a 5-year plan.
Yes.
That's what he said at the meeting.
Yes.
And then in the second paragraph, there's reference to you having explained to him the seriousness and difficulty of the situation,
Yes.
possible harm to the church,
Yes.
harm to the Diocese of Armidale,
Yes.
harm to the priesthood,
Yes.
and harm to himself.
Yes.
And each of those harm would continue if he remained in the priesthood.
Yes.
Now, then it's referred that you, Brian Lucas, emphasised that there were young men out there who could still come forward and lay charges through civil proceedings.
Yes.
Now, stopping there, you knew that because he had admitted to you other men, young men now, who he had sexually abused, who had not yet laid charges against him or taken him to court.
And my recollection is that he said there were people out there making these allegations, which he denied. My comment would have been, well, if something's happened out there, they can still come forward.
And you knew there were young men out there because he told you that there were young men out there.
But he had denied that he'd done anything with them.
Well, in order to deny it, he must have told you about them.
No, he said there were people making false allegations against him.
And you, by having said this as recorded in this letter, did not accept that his denial, I take it.
I was suspicious of it always.
Because if you accepted his denial, you wouldn't have said there were young men who could come forward because you accepted that nothing happened.
That's true.
Now, then you say experience from similar situations showed that the betrayal felt by victims of sexual abuse often centred on the trust.
Yes.
Then if they saw Farrell continuing as a priest, it's more likely they'd press charges.
Yes.
And that was based on what?
That was my common experience.
And therefore an argument that you used with others to laicise themselves
Yes.
or get out.
Yes.
That if they stayed in, they're more likely to be further charges, whereas if they left, there was less likely.
That was the common experience.
Your experience.
Yes.
Now, if the victims knew that serious measures that involved contact with children were taken, then the likelihood of further charges was significantly reduced.
Yes.
And that was an argument you commonly used with priests to get them out of the church.
Yes.
Now, over the next page, paragraph 3, just before I go to paragraph 3, that previous paragraph, paragraph 2, is consistent, isn't it, with Wayne Peters' first letter? Should you accept that? What was he records in paragraph 2 was consistent with what was in his letter. I beg your pardon?
No.
You don't accept that?
No.
Just coming over to paragraph 3. What's stated here is John Farrell indicated that he was fearful that if he was laicized or no longer seen as a priest, the chance of the young men he had offended against bringing civil charges against him was greater than if he remained a priest in a public forum. Now, it's clear from that paragraph, isn't it, that Farrell told the meeting that there were young men who he had offended against.
Well, my recollection is that he said they were making those allegations. I don't recall that he said that he had offended against them.
And in writing that, Wayne Peters was writing that sentence that was consistent with his first letter.
Yes.
Now, further, that is Farrell, indicated that he had heard that the reason the families of the victims did not bring charges back in 1984 was because they did not wish to publicly hurt the church. Now, again, that's an admission, isn't it, that what had happened back in 1984 was misconduct of a sort that could result in criminal charges.
Yes.
And that's consistent as well with what Mr. Peter said, Father Peter said in his first letter.
Yes.
And then Monsieur Senior Usher is explaining the hurt to the victims and of Farrell being further prosecuted if he was not a priest and if he continued to be seen in a public forum. That sentence there is based upon, I suggest to you, that the first meeting referred to the fact that Farrell had sexually misconducted himself and that these were the consequences in relation to whether or not he was laicized. Do you accept that?
No, that was not my understanding.
And then it stated that you agreed with that proposition. Is that wrong?
Well, I don't think it was put in those terms, is my recollection.
So you, where it says Brian Lucas agreed, you say that you didn't agree with the proposition that was put above. Is that right? But also pointed out that no one could give any guarantees that the victims would not bring charges. Now, that's something you said.
Well, if there were people out there, I would put it to him on that basis. If there are people out there against whom you have offended, in the context of you denying that, but if there are people out there, they will bring charges.
So you said what was said in that letter and attributed to you at that paragraph.
On the basis that if there are such allegations,
And it was your view that there was no statute of limitations in relation to sexual offences against
certainly,
minors.
yes.
And that would have been a reason you gave again to persuade people to get out.
If there are people out there that you've offended against, they will come forward one day.
Further down to paragraph 5, and here Farrell is negotiating the options.
Yes.
And you are recorded as saying you advised that would place Bishop Manning, that is, if he didn't want either, in a situation where he would have to consider initiating canonical proceedings. Again, that was threatening him that if you don't go our way, you'll go the harder way.
Yes.
The possibility that the young men who had been offended against might have to be contacted in a canonical process was mentioned.
Yes.
Now,
One, two. I don't know whether this can be heard, but I've got the recording going. It seems to be picking up a lot of noise, so it could actually be continuing to pick up what's being said. Otherwise, the noise is coming from another source. But anyway, I've kept the recording going after there's been a hesitation. Sorry, a blocking of the sound. Let me start this again.
isn't that right?
Well, he was in this denial and couldn't understand that, in fact, if there were people out there that he'd offended against, they will one day come forward.
Now, coming over to paragraph 7, Farrell requested of you some background reading material on the whole subject.
Yes, I have no recollection of what that would be.
Such a request, if it was made, indicates that Farrell clearly had his wits about him. You accept that?
Well, that's probably likely, yes.
Over to paragraph 17. But just before we go to 17, come back to paragraph 7. See paragraph 8. He indicated he needed a further 2 weeks. You remember
Yes. Well, I don't specifically remember that, but there was talk of some extension of time.
that? Paragraph 9. Didn't have the authority to extend it. It had to be Bishop Manning. That was the case, wasn't it? And then the next paragraph was suggested that Monsignor Peters ring Bishop Manning in relation to the extension.
Yes,
Now, that would have been his job to do, given that he came from Armidale.
presumably.
Coming down to 11, then there's reference to the phone call. I take it you remember Father Peters leaving.
I don't remember that.
You don't doubt that that happened.
I presume it did.
And then the extension was given.
Yes.
You remember that the extension was given.
I don't, but only what I've read there.
You accept that the extension was given.
Yes, presumably.
Well, you know from subsequent dates that the extension must have been given.
Yes.
Moving down, you understood that the result of the meeting was Farrell was going to write a letter setting out his views.
Yes.
And paragraph 14, Farrell raised the subject of money. Now, I've taken you've noticed going through the documents that the subject of money was one very close to Farrell's heart.
Yes.
He raised it on many occasions.
Yes.
That's the case because he had no source of income from the church.
Yes.
And it was entirely dependent upon the church.
Yes.
So the paragraph 14, you recall that?
horrible practice.
And paragraph 15 is similar. And in terms of paragraph 16, do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
You don't doubt that that was likely to have
Yes.
been part of the meeting. So coming to 17, it begins with John Farrell indicated that other people had supported him in not seeing the same seriousness in the situation as the committee saw. Now, that's clear from the documents you've read in order to give evidence that he had sought on a number of occasions others to support him.
Yes.
Now, then it's recorded that John Usher asked if these people knew the full story. John Farrell said they did. John Usher stated that it was understood that only John Farrell, Brian Lucas, John Usher, Wayne Peters and Bishop Manning knew the full extent of the story at that stage.
Yes.
John Farrell said that those people were indeed the only ones who knew the full story. The committee members were left uncertain as to how many people John Farrell had talked to, how much he has
which was part of the focus of the meeting, of course, wasn't referred to in Wayne Peters' letter, which is another puzzlement for me.
Well, why is that puzzling?
Well, if that was why he didn't make reference to that, because that was part of the presentation of the problem to him, what he'd done with the young lady, yes.
There was a 3-hour meeting. You've said that Father Peters didn't describe everything that happened at that meeting
Well,
in a 2.5-page letter.
I would have thought there'd be some reference, at least by one line, to what the reaction was to the young lady. He dismissed it as not being criminal and not being of significance at all.
So you remember Farrell's reaction to that complaint at the meeting?
That's my recollection. It was then something that wasn't pursued any further.
So it's the case, isn't it, that as at this meeting you knew of rumours and complaints in Moree,
Yes.
and you knew of the various allegations that also arose in Moree,
Well, I put those two together. Yeah.
plus the other two complaints that we've discussed, as well as the dismissal of the charges.
Yes.
And you don't say, in addition to that, you knew of the specific admissions made in the first letter by Peters. Now, putting all of those together and accepting for the moment your evidence that you didn't know of the specific admissions, that could well constitute the full story, couldn't it?
Yes.
Now, just coming down to the next sentence, committee members were left uncertain as to how many people he'd spoken to and how much he'd told them or what he'd told them. That was the case, wasn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, just in relation to one other paragraph, which is paragraph 6. And again, there was reference there to no possibility of any appointment. Because the case that you went into the meeting knowing that there was no possibility of any appointment, didn't you?
Yes.
And then reference to the 5-year plan. And then the last sentence is, at best, any return to ministry would be in a very limited way that removed as far as possible the risk of reoffending.
Yes.
Now, the risk of reoffending is a concept that only applies if there's knowledge of offending.
Well, there'd obviously been some issue with the young man. I regarded that as some form of offending, yes.
So you accepted that what you surmised had happened in respect of the young man was offending by Farrell?
Certainly.
And you were seeking to avoid the possibility of risk of reoffending because, in your mind, he had offended.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, that was the last meeting, wasn't it?
I think so, yes.
You didn't have anything more to do with Farrell after
No.
that? Nothing at all?
Not that I recall, no.
Did you follow the progress of his laicization at all?
No. Well, only insofar as each bishop, both Bishop Manning and Bishop Mathis, from time to time would make reference to the difficulties they were having with that.
Now, you had an interview with Mr. Whitlam.
Yes.
Can I take you to some of that? That's tab 6. No, I take it you've read this.
Sorry, I think that's
I beg your pardon. It'll come to you. Do you have that?
Yes.
Can you tell us how that...
Kennedy and Bishop Fisher established this inquiry, and Cardinal Pell wrote to me directing my cooperation with it.
Did either Cardinal Pell or Bishop Kennedy say anything to you about talking to the other two, that is fathers?
Yes, I think Cardinal Pell's letter to me from memory, it's probably in the bundle somewhere, told me not to talk to anyone about it, yes.
It's a bit late for that, wasn't it?
Of course.
Did you speak with each other after the inquiry was called and before you...
No, we took that deliberate decision to be obedient to that direction.
Did you take that decision jointly?
Well, I didn't talk to him about whether he was going to talk to me or not. I just didn't talk to him.
Thank you. Now, you had your solicitor present,
Yes.
and there was some discussion at the beginning about whether or not procedural fairness would be accorded to you,
Yes.
which was not ultimately resolved during the beginning of the interview. That's right.
Yes, that's a verbatim interview, so whatever was said there is correct.
Now, if we can turn firstly to page 19. You see there on the screen at about line 8, you refer to a level of just complete disassociation from reality. By that you mean he wouldn't accept that there were serious things that he'd done and he had to go.
Yes.
And the reference to the complaints was the Parramatta complaint and the, as we describe, her girl.
Yes.
Coming down to the bottom of that page, line 43, you say there the case in the Narrabri court had been dismissed, and you had suspicions there were others, and who they were and what they'd say and whether they'd be willing to participate was problematic.
Yes.
Now, you had some names at that stage, did you?
No.
You didn't? Now, turning over to page 23, towards the bottom of that page, starting at line 38, there's reference there to the question, at least he was saying something about his position as a priest.
Sorry, which line? I'm sorry.
I beg your pardon, line 38?
Yes.
Do you have that on page
Yes.
23? Sorry, I didn't mean to go quickly.
I didn't hear you say which line, that's all. My hearing.
You're with us now.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
You were asked in relation to what Farrell had said at the meeting, that at least he was, well, rather than asked, you were told that at least he was saying something about his position as a priest giving him protection.
Yes.
And you replied, we said that was just fantasy.
Yes.
Now again, that's a similar point to the disassociation point you made. But to think that he was going to come back was just ridiculous.
Yes.
And he kept thinking he would come back
Yes.
because he wouldn't accept the seriousness of the case against him.
Yes.
Now, coming over to page 24, you're asked questions about the letter I just took you to at the bottom of that page. The paragraphs are read to you, and then at the bottom of that page, you say that you're not sure what the full story meant. Your recollection was that there was still a fair level of minimisation.
Yes.
So what he told you about his misconduct was not what you thought was the full level of his misconduct.
That's probably correct, yes.
But he certainly did tell you about occasions where he had misconducted himself.
And what we were speaking about there, I think, was the young lady, which he was completely dismissed, and the young man in the podcast.
I beg your pardon?
I think what's referred to there is the complaint by the young lady, which he completely dismissed. He totally minimised any significance of that. Then we had this issue of the dismissal of the case in Narrabri.
So you didn't mean minimisation in the sense that he told you of conduct which was wrongdoing, but he didn't tell you all of it. Now turning over to page 36. You refer at about, starting at line 20, you were asked whether there was anything more you think you could tell Mr. Whitlam, and you said, you referred to puzzlement,
Yes.
which you referred to here. But John, in my conversations with John when we were negotiating the Four Corners response, now stopping there, that's a good description, isn't it, of what you were doing?
Yes.
Negotiating among you to come up with a response that you could put in the public domain.
Yes.
Quite definitive that the correct wording was to say that he didn't make any admissions of a specific nature. Now, stopping there, the correct wording, meaning the wording you'd all agreed to.
Yes.
But somehow or another, Monsignor Usher got it wrong in what he put in the note to the Cardinal.
Yes.
Again, it can be heard here is a situation where, it's back on now. That was a period
About line 28.
there where there's no voice.
You refer to a general impression that we got him to a point of acknowledging that he had not behaved himself in the way that he should, but denial about doing what somebody had said he had done, and he wasn't a fit person to stay in the priesthood. Now, that was at the end of the 3 meetings you got into that position?
Yes.
And that's why it took 3 meetings, because there was a deal of persuasion that had to be done.
Yes.
And he wanted to go away and think about it.
Yes.
None of which was unusual in your experience.
Well, mostly it didn't take 3 meetings.
But he was a difficult character, wasn't he?
Yes.
And obstinate.
Yes.
Now, if we can go down to the bottom of that page, you're referring there, I think, to the second letter, the letter after the second meeting, which was your first letter to Bishop Manning.
Yes.
And you refer to having made some progress in that letter.
Yes.
And the progress that you'd made is that you'd got him as far as talking about the 5-year plan and agreeing to aspects of it. Thank you. Now, you understand, do you, that in one of his interviews with Mr. Whitlam, Bishop Manning, when taken to the letter, was of the view that some of the phrasing used or the words used was similar to what Farrell used? If indeed that was the case, that Bishop Manning, who knew Father Farrell well, had that view, it would be more likely that what Father Peters had put in the letter was an accurate take on what was said. Do you accept that?
Unless there was other information from somewhere else, I don't know.
And if there was no other information from anywhere else, it had to have come from what Father Farrell said.
Well, I don't know, because that's not my recollection.
But assuming that there was no information from any other source, then the only source consistent with the letter was Father Farrell at that meeting. You accept that?
If that's what was said, yes.
Now, just two other matters, if I can, Father. Firstly, at tab 313. Now you'll see this is an email from Nicholas Tonti Filippini.
Yes.
Now you knew him, didn't you?
Yes.
Who was he?
Who was he?
At this time, July 2012.
Sorry, what year?
July 2012.
Tab 313, sorry.
Oh,
yes.
no, I beg your pardon, it's tab 313. I'm sorry, I was confused you.
Sorry, 2012, he was, I think at that stage, sorry, 2012.
Yes.
Oh, he was probably at that stage almost semi-retired. He was very, very ill. I'm not quite sure precisely, but in 2012 he would have been perhaps semi-retired. He was an independent ethicist.
You'd had some dealings with him in the past.
Oh, many, yes.
And it's fair to say that you didn't always see eye to eye on things.
Oh, we sometimes had vigorous conversations, but very respectful. I had enormous admiration for him.
He had a different view as to the way in which the protocol should proceed, I think, didn't he?
In 1990, I think he presented some views. We had a conversation about that. Some of his views were very pertinent, and we took those on board.
Thank you. Now, this is an email to Bishop Anthony Fisher, who at that time was Bishop of Parramatta. And he refers to sensitive matters and then continues down to the 5th paragraph. And he says there, I now find myself in a position to have knowledge that bears upon the veracity or otherwise of the statement reportedly made to Cardinal Pell by one of those priests in relation to the admissions of abuse made by a priest of your diocese. Now, did Dr. Tonti Filippini said anything to you about that?
No.
Any idea what he might be talking about?
I'm not sure who the priest of the Parramatta Diocese was that he would have been referring to. And I presume he's referring to Father Usher, since it was Father Usher who reportedly made a statement to Cardinal Pell.
Do you have any knowledge from any source as to what knowledge Dr. Filippini had? Has this been brought to your attention before these proceedings?
No.
No? Is it the first time you've heard of it?
Probably. I'm not sure whether it was presented to me by Mr. Whitlam. I don't remember, but certainly I don't remember at that time, no.
Was that you understand at the time, by the time I mean 1992, to have had access to knowledge of that sort that you're aware of?
I'm not sure with respect to what you mean by knowledge of that sort.
Well, he says that he had knowledge that bared upon the veracity of the statement reportedly made to Cardinal Pell. As you say, that's likely to be Father Usher's statement in relation to the admissions made. That's what he's saying. Do you see that?
Yes, I'm not sure.
My question is whether you know of the position he was in 1992 and whether that position, to your mind, may have given him access to knowledge of the sort set out in this.
I wouldn't have expected so, but I don't know.
He died not long after that, I think, didn't he?
I'm not sure. I remember we were both at a conference a short time before he died. Was the last time I'd had conversations with him, but
you know that he's now.
I know that, yes.
Thank you. Now, tab 317. See, this is an email from Alex Cohn, who's a partner at a law firm.
Yes.
To Paul Davis. I think you indicated earlier that he may well have been associated with the Diocese of Parramatta.
Yes.
Is that right? And this is the 1st of August, so that is after the inquiry was announced by Mr. Whitlam?
Yes.
And well before you were interviewed?
I forget the exact date of my interview.
I think you were interviewed in September.
Yes.
And the letter said that I've had the opportunity to confer with Bishop Manning this morning, and we're instructed to request that the following documents not be provided to Mr. Whitlam, and then sets out a letter dated the 19th of May and a chronology and various other bits and pieces. Now, did you know that there was a decision made with legal advice as to what to or not to provide to Mr. Whitlam?
No.
Did you know that there were documents that had been identified and then there was a request that they not be made?
No.
Didn't know anything about that?
No.
Did you have any role in what went to Mr. Whitlam and what?
Absolutely not.
And you were provided by him with various documents, I take it?
Yes.
And commented on those documents?
Yes.
And I take it you were not in a position to know from that process what he had or didn't have?
That's true.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honours. I have nothing further.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I do. I have some brief questions. No.
Anyone else? Very well, I think you should go.
Thank you. Father Lucas, my name is Duggan. I appear for Monsignor Usher in these proceedings.
Yes.
If I can please take you to a document which is at tab 262, that you hopefully have. Do you have that?
Yes.
I think you were asked some questions about this yesterday. It's an email from you to John Usher, do you see that? On 31 May 2012.
Yes.
And in it, there are various details from the Broken Rights website.
Yes.
Now, if you just go to the last page of this email, that's your signature details there, the electronic
That's correct.
details. Those details from the Broken Rights website, that's clearly a cut and paste
Yes.
email, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, if you can just go back to the first page, the initials in the top right of the email, do you recognise those?
That's not my handwriting. It's JU, but that's not my handwriting.
And the handwriting below that, Farrell brackets Armadale Priest, is that your handwriting?
I don't think it is now.
And you don't think it is, or?
Well, it's... I'd be as confident as I can be that it's not my handwriting.
Can I suggest to you that it's Monsignor Usher's handwriting? Would you dispute that?
I wouldn't dispute that.
Now, there's some handwriting in a thicker pen just below that.
Yes.
KO has a version updated for June. Is that your handwriting?
No.
Can I take you to page 3 of this email?
Yes.
And about 2/3 of the way down the page, the paragraph starting on 3 September 1991, you see that?
Yes.
And there's a line to the right of the 3 bullet points.
Yes.
And then there's the paragraph, interviewed by the 3 officials, Father X, Y, Z, admitted that he had been committing sexual acts on young boys in his parishes.
Yes.
And there's a question mark next to that paragraph.
Yes.
Now, yesterday I think you gave evidence that that question mark might have been put there by you. Is it possible that you're mistaken and the question mark was put there by someone else?
No, I had that recollection that it was my question mark, but if there's some contrary view, I can see that it was my recollection that was my question mark, pointing out to John Usher the relevant part.
Well, can I suggest to you that it is Monsignor Usher's question mark? Are you in a position to dispute that?
No.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
I have some questions.
Well, does anyone else have any questions? I've already asked previously. You didn't identify yourself. Does anyone else have any questions?
Just me.
Well, you'll go last. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd be grateful if when I ask that question whether everyone who wishes to ask questions tells me at the time. Yes, Mr. Archie.
Thank you. Father Lucas, I represent Bishop Manning.
Yes.
I just have a few general questions, please. Firstly, in relation to the adoption of the protocols for responses to issues involving child sexual abuse, and I'll take them if I need to. Is it fair to say that from April 1991, Australian bishops had adopted those protocols as setting out a strategy for bishops to follow in responding to matters of child sexual abuse as they arose?
So I'm having a little difficulty hearing. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm just going to move that over.
It's not your fault, it's my hearing. I'm sorry.
Okay, is that easier?
Yes, sorry, my apologies.
Firstly, so I was just asking about the protocols for dealing with allegations of criminal behaviour.
Yes.
From April 1991, bishops within New South Wales adopted the 1991 protocol as the protocol to follow when responding to allegations of criminal behaviour involving their priests.
Yes.
All right. And that was later amended in 1992.
Yes.
Again, it was the protocol to be followed by the bishops when they had to respond to an allegation of criminal behaviour involving a priest.
Yes.
And the terms of the protocol itself exhorted their bishops to adhere to the protocol set out, as in how they should respond to it.
Yes.
Now, I think you were asked this just generally. One of the things you said earlier this morning about why Bishop Manning would have referred Farrell to you following conversation he had where he appears to have potentially made some admissions, that is prior to your 3 September 1992 meeting. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Right. Now, if I need to, if the document at tab 137 could be brought up at paragraph 6.42. Sorry, 139, my apologies, and it's on page 7.
139.
I'm
sorry.
My apologies. And you see the paragraph 6.4.2, which deals with where any information is brought by an accused, might in this case be Farrell, to the ecclesiastical authority, which would be the bishop, that matter should be immediately referred to the Special Issues Resources Group.
Sorry,
4.2?
Yes, sorry.
Yes. So this is the section that says that even if the accused himself or the priest brings the matter to the bishop's attention, that issue had to be then immediately directed to the Special Issues Resources Group.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So that would be consistent with the approach taken by Bishop Manning. Would you agree with this on this occasion, that even when a matter was brought to his attention by Farrell himself, he still referred Father Farrell to the Special Issue Resources Group? All right. Now, look, just generally, one of the matters that had arisen prior to the implementation of the protocols in 1991 and 1992, the amendments, was a recognition by those within the church that bishops themselves were generally ill-informed about how to respond to matters involving criminal behaviour.
Yes.
The reason for the protocol was to set a strategy to be followed, a procedure to be followed, so there could be an informed approach taken when responding to those allegations.
Yes.
And also so that a committee could be set up of specialists who could advise the bishop on what needed to be done.
Yes.
And that included also advising the bishop or the other church authorities on any legal responses to information that they had, including any need to report to the police. Do you agree with that?
That may not have come from the members of the committee. Specialist legal advice will generally come from the diocesan lawyers.
Precisely, but as a preliminary, someone, a specialist, needed to recognise that further advice needed to be sought. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Right. And that would have been the responsibility of those in the committee to recognise when it was necessary to seek further advice.
Yes.
And the purpose of having all of those matters referred to the Special Issue Resources Group or the committee was that they were the people who could recognise when further advice was needed and act upon that.
Yes.
And then advise the bishop if further advice was
Yes.
needed. Now, now, you were asked yesterday just about the 15th of April 1992 discussion. Do you need to see that? That was the discussion. I'll just open that up. All right, 136. Sorry. Yeah, 136.
136.
Yes, 136. Thank you, Father. See the top note there, you asked just some questions. Without going over it again, I just want to clarify what your evidence is. Do you now have a recollection at all of the conversation between yourself and the bishop on that occasion? All right. Now, can I just ask this, as now looking backwards, were you aware at the time, say in April 1992, that in years prior, Monsignor Usher, or Father Usher as he then was, had firstly interviewed Father Farrell?
Well, I'm not sure when I became aware of that.
All right. So you don't know now whether at this time you knew
No, I
of
don't.
that fact. All right. And did you, in April 1992, if you're able to tell us, did you know then that there'd been correspondence between Monsignor Peters and Father Usher in relation to a complaint that had come up about Father Farrell at Kenthurst in relation to a camping trip?
My understanding of the camping trip wasn't that there was a...
No, that had not occurred. It was just in relation to the
Yes.
discussion
No,
of...
I don't think I had that knowledge.
had that knowledge at the time. All right. Now, it would appear, though, you've now looked at all of those documents and you would be aware of those matters.
Yes.
And would it be fair to say now that would appear to be that at least from October 1990, members of the Armidale Diocese, Bishop Manning or through his Vicar General, had been having discussions with members of the committee in relation to Father Farrell.
Yes.
And the committee, I mean the Special Issues, either committee or resources group, as it was. All right. And so to the extent that if in April 1992 you did not know that of those earlier conversations with Monsignor Usher and between Monsignor Usher and Monsignor Peters, and the interview of Farrell, that would appear to have been just some omission that occurred between the members of the committee in terms of their communications with each other of those different contexts. Would you agree with that?
No, I think at that stage it would be unfair to describe it as a committee. They were individuals who responded to particular requests.
Sorry.
So it was really only after the 1992 protocol, and at some point a little bit after that, that the New South Wales bishops formally appointed people. The basis on which John Usher and I were asked to respond was based on some information given, I think, in about 1990 or so, to individual bishops. These are the names to use in this place, and there are other names for other states. So it wasn't a committee in the sense of having any interaction between ourselves.
How much longer would you need?
I think I'll be 5 to 10 minutes.
Mr. Skinner, how much time do you need?
We'll take a maximum of 5 minutes.
Do we think we can finish by 1:20?
Yeah, I'm in my friend's hands, but I'll adhere to most.
Is everyone happy to sit till 1:20? I'm looking down below me. Yep. Okay.
Certainly by then the April 1992 amendments did hold out to bishops that in fact there was a committee that they could seek advice.
There's various laws groups to be established.
Yes, all right. Now, let me just ask you this. I do not want to go into the detail of the 3 September 1992 meeting at all. Do you understand that? I don't intend to ask you any questions about what happened at that meeting or what was said. I just want to ask you some questions about the process that was undertaken.
Yes.
All right. Now, it would be fair to say that in relation to that 3 September 1992 meeting, or any meeting in fact that you undertook with a priest or other clergy, could I ask you, was it your practice at the time not to report details if admissions had been made to a bishop?
Well, it would depend on the circumstances.
Would one of the things that you had in mind the fact that if admissions were made that needed to be reported, that would be something the group would act upon?
Well, it would depend on the nature of the meeting.
I understand. Okay, let me put it a slightly different way. It's clear that the protocol from 1992 asks that all those complaints go to the Special Issue Resources Group or the persons nominated, correct? One of the reasons being is that we've already talked about, so that there can be a central and informed response to allegations of criminal behaviour, correct?
Yes.
And that group can identify what needs to be done, including whether any specialist legal advice needs to be sought about reporting to the police, correct?
Yes.
Right. Now,
to be honest, in 1992, the question of reporting to the police was not in people's minds.
right.
The question in 1992 was really working out what victims might have done, helping them report to the police. But I don't believe in 1992 it was in anyone's mind that there'd be some form of independent reporting to the police outside of some involvement of people who've been accused being part of that process.
Can I ask you then, does that follow from the presentations that you made to bishops, that issue of potential needing to report directly was not something bishops were advised about?
No, there was a different sort of reporting. There's the mandatory reporting with respect to children, which of course the law on that is clear. Bishops are advised about that. The question of reporting, for example, in New South Wales only with respect to Section 316, I'm sure was not in my mind in 1992.
And therefore, if it was not in your mind, that was not something upon which you had given advice to the bishops of New South Wales, is that correct? All right. And just extending that further, if it was not something in your mind, is it also... sorry, I'll just withdraw that. Okay. Leaving that aside, though, whether or not it was in your mind, the question of whether it should have been in your mind or whether that was part of what should have been considered was the responsibility of the group the Special Issue Resources Group to have turned their mind to with the assistance of legal advice.
If necessary, yes.
Just give me a second. Come on.
Mr. Skinner.
Yes, thank you. You remember, for the record, Skinner and I have been in your interests, Father Lucas. Do you remember yesterday, just after lunch, you were taken to the circumstances of the meeting being set up, in that you agreed that would be said, you presume John and Wayne came, that's John Usher and Wayne Peters, and they had dinner together beforehand, or had, would be said, you presume John and Wayne came, that's John, about to logistically set the meeting up. I want to answer that, do you understand?
Yes.
You agreed yesterday that you hadn't seen the letter that apparently the Bishop had sent to Farrell, dated 27th of August 1992, which is tab 160 for the record, saying, I'm referring you to a meeting with the representative of the Special Issues Resource Group. Manning sent that to you. You remember that?
Yes.
And you remember you were showing a file note that apparently Bishop Manning then spoke about that letter with Farrell 2 days before you met him. That is on the 1st of September 1992. See that?
Yes.
And apparently, if that file note expresses what was said properly, Farrell said he was prepared to meet with you, and he made no reference to Wayne Peters also being present. Remember that?
Yes.
Had by the time that file note apparently was written, 1st of September 1992, the meeting being set up?
I don't recall, I presume it would have been.
The Bishop says it was made, he says in his letter to Farrell that referring him, 27th of August, so a few days before, does that assist whether the Bishop spoke to you first before he wrote that letter to Farrell or not?
Not sure.
So, as you said yesterday, you can't recall the preliminaries, but do you recall Wayne Peters saying anything to you about any knowledge he had of specifically the discussions apparently his bishop had with Farrell 2 days before?
No.
Do you have a memory that he didn't say anything to you?
I have no memory that he said it. I think I would have remembered if he'd have given some background briefing about that.
All right, there's another thing I wanted to ask you about from the contemporaneous notes. It appears, again, for the record, tab 164, that Father John Usher rang Bishop Manning on the 10th of September 1992. Sorry, withdraw that. It appears that Bishop Manning rang Father Usher. That can come up on the screen. I don't think you've taken to that before. That's tab 164. I ask you to assume, as I do it, and then been presented to us in this form, that is an extract from Father John Usher's diary for 10th September 1992. You see, it says, spoke to Kevin Manning, brackets, rang me earlier. It says.
Yes.
See that? Now, leaving aside the content of it, were you aware that Father John Usher spoke, it appears, to Bishop Manning on that occasion?
I have no recollection of knowing about that.
Did you ever speak to Bishop Manning around about that time?
I expect I would have run after each meeting, yes.
Would it be normal
Could
that John would
I-
sorry,
I'm just looking at that date of the 10th of September. Between the two meetings, and I'm not sure precisely the dates, is this the first meeting was the 3rd of September.
yes,
The next meeting was the 24th of September.
yes.
I was overseas. I undertook the study tour on the protocol around that time to the United States. So it could well be on the 10th of September. I was not around, and perhaps that's why Bishop Manning spoke to John Usher.
Do you remember Wayne Peters taking any notes in the meeting of the 3rd of September 1992?
No one took any notes.
Did he ever discuss with you that he would report back to Bishop Manning?
I was presuming there'd be some sort of report back.
Did he discuss the form in which he would report?
No.
Did he ever tell you that he had reported?
No.
Did he ever tell you that it would seem 8 days for him to send a letter back?
No. I knew nothing about that letter ever.
All right, well, just then briefly, you said yesterday when you were asked about your background, you had legal training before you came into the priesthood,
Yes.
and you mentioned that you worked in the children's courts. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And you mentioned that Cardinal Clancy knew you had some background in the children's court, and that may have been a reason why he first put you with John Usher to head up the sort of matters that you worked on with John Usher.
Yes.
Can you tell the Commission a little bit about also, did you continue to work in the Children's Court when you were a priest?
No, I only did that during my seminary training. The Law Society had set up a legal aid scheme in the New South Wales Children's Courts, and I saw the opportunity for my summer vacations and mid-year vacations to be on the roster of those duty solicitor schemes, and I did a fair bit of work over the next 4 years when I was in the seminary representing children in the Children's Courts.
And in those days, and probably even today, you do see learn of some horrible things that bring children before the court.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary experience in my life.
And you have published on legal matters involving children?
Yes, I took an interest in it. It was all that I had to do, so I took a significant interest in some of the academic sides of it. There'd been, at that time in the late 1970s, was when the first mandatory reporting came in New South Wales. There were changes, particularly to the evidentiary questions in children's courts. So I wrote up a few publications, Criminal Law Journal, Law Society Journal, about different aspects of that rather new area of having solicitors representing children, particularly children who can't give instructions, and how that all worked.
And why did you want to write on those sort of things?
I found it was an area of public policy and social policy that I took an interest in, and as I said, I had that experience of the things that I saw there, and there were great difficulties in the management of those cases.
But then finally, there was a somewhat Delphic comment you made yesterday in the transcript of 21231. About in effect your role in trying to get priests to leave the church, and you said, and that being subject to the bishop's control. 21231, line 17. And you said, I mean, you can't physically drag a person to therapy, so on. And then you say, I'm thinking particularly of the men I talked to who pleaded guilty, and addressing the Commissioner directly, I think you said this. You did a case study on that just last week. Now, you're referring there to some example of you speaking to a priest And what is it, encouraging him to plead guilty, is it?
Yes,
And who was that?
that was Vincent Ryan.
Yes, thank you. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, Ms. Finesse.
Nothing further on.
Ms. Freehold, Father, that concludes your evidence and you're excused. And we'll adjourn until
10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
10 a.m. in the morning.